Yeah, we can start.
Okay. Hello. We're going to presentation about the Ivan Pavlov. So we are Susie, Bomi, Mary, and Jasmine. So yeah, can you slide the next? So my name is Bomi Lim. I'm going to talk about Ivan Pavlov's life background information. Ivan Petrovich Pavlov was born on September 14, 1849 at Ryazan, Russia. His father, Peter Pavlov, was a village priest. He educated first at church school in Ryazan and then at the theological seminary in Ryazan, Russia. He studied chemistry and physiology at the University of St. Petersburg. Pavlov died of double pneumonia at the age of 86 in Leningrad on February 27, 1936. In 1875, Pavlov completed his course with an outstanding record and received the degree of Candidate of Natural Science. However, impelled by his overwhelming interest in physiology, he decided to continue his study and proceed to the Academy of Medical Surgery to take the third course there. He completed this in 1879 and was again awarded a gold medal. Ivan Pavlov won a Copley Medal and the Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine in 1904. Pavlov is best known for classic conditioning study, also known as Pavlovian conditioning. He developed an experiment testing the concept of the condition reflex. The most famous example of classical conditioning was Pavlov's experiment with dogs who salivated in response to a bell tone. Pavlov showed that when a bell was sounded, each time the dog was fed, the dog learned to associate the sound with the presentation of the food. Pavlov's research into classical conditioning began to lay the foundation for the field of behaviorism and comparative psychology, and condition techniques are still used in behavior modification. For example, one highly popular form of dog training called clicker training condition a dog to respond to a clicker as if it is a food reward. Thank you.
Okay, so the next is explanation of theory. There is one video in which it is shown that he collected the saliva of the dog number of times for his experiment. He discovered a new response that he termed as a conditioned reflex. He presented a variety of stimuli before the presentation of the food, from which he found that after repeated association, a dog would salivate to the presence of stimulus rather than food. And as he also noticed that his dog would begin to salivate whenever he entered the room, even when he was not bringing them food. That is when he realized that salivary response was not due to an automatic physiological process. The next, he also found out about the classical conditioning. He first demonstrated it, and in which he showed that dogs could be conditioned to salivate at the sound of a bell. If that sound was repeatedly presented at the same time, they were given food. First, the dog were presented with the food, they salivated. The dog was the unconditioned stimuli, and the salivation was an unconditioned response. This theory of classical conditioning was famous since 1890 to 1930. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mari, and I'm going to present about components and stages of the theory. In the theory of classical conditioning, there are three components: unconditioned response, unconditioned stimulus, and neutral stimulus. Unconditioned response is a natural response the organisms are born with, and unconditioned stimulus is the stimulus that causes unconditioned response. Also, neutral stimulus means the stimulus that doesn't cause any unconditioned response. The classical conditioning of the Pavlov consists of 3 stages: before conditioning, during conditioning, and after conditioning. At first, when the unconditioned response and unconditioned stimulus come into play, Pavlov called it as before conditioning. Seeing the dog experiment, the treat is unconditioned stimulus for the dog because it makes dog drools, which means the treat causes unconditioned response for the dog. At this stage, the dog doesn't respond with the bell sound because the bell sound is a neutral stimulus. Second, at the stage of dream conditioning, Pavlov gives the treat with the bell sound and repeats the pattern consistently. This is the stage it begins to associate the neutral stimulus with the unconditioned stimulus. Third, at the stage of after conditioning, as the pattern is repeated, the dog starts to respond with the bell sound. So the dog drools when the bell is ringing because the dog thinks the treat will be given to him when the bell is ringing, which means the dog responds with the neutral stimulus. After this conditioning built up, the bell sound becomes a conditioned stimulus and the drooling becomes a conditioned response coming after the conditioned stimulus. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Susie, and I am going to be talking about some examples of Pavlov's theory in real life. So our first example is when we are going to the hospital. So when children go to the hospital, they cry even though they're not going to receive any treatment. Seeing a doctor or smelling the scents of medication make them expect something bad will happen to them. Next is your phone's ringtone. So you're really familiar with your ringtone. So if you hear it, you're going to pick up your phone. When you watch this video of this guy mimicking ringtones, his brother is checking his phone every time he makes a sound. And then our last scenario is exam anxiety. So all the inanimate objects that surround writing exam, a pencil, eraser, the paper, even the desk can all affect writing a test at school. These are all natural stimuli. Students begin to associate them as well as the silence and even the clock ticking as stressors and can cause negative responses. These negative responses can cause them to be overwhelmed more often, as well as cause higher spikes of anxiety when it comes to any sort of formal writing. Thank you. And these are our references.